Welcome everybody. Thanks for joining us today. I know it says lunch and learn. If you're eating lunch now, go
An
ahead.
early lunch.
Yeah, early lunch is totally fine. Thanks everyone for joining us. I'm Adam Sled, the Executive Director of the Dominion Energy Innovation Center. This is sort of our regular lunch and learn webinar for the Green Tech Network. We've got the DEIC team here with me, Bobby Carey and Braden Croy. And then our guest today is Jerry Silva, who's joining us from the Tobacco Region Revitalization Commission, which is part of the Virginia government. And, you know, one of the things we talk a lot about, and hopefully some of this is very relevant for you joining us today, is, you know, we've got a new technology and energy technology that you're trying to commercialize. One of the hardest parts is actually getting those initial projects off the ground. And so one of the things that we've been really excited to try and figure out in this state is how we get some government dollars specifically for commercialization projects, for getting things off the ground and out in the world, actually impacting our energy systems, our grid, and, you know, starting to prove themselves, right? Because it's all about de-risking in this industry. You can't de-risk until you actually do something. So thankfully, we have a fund now up and operating and running in Virginia that is providing some dollars to de-risk projects and make great things happen. And Jerry is the guy in charge of it. So I've been talking to Jerry about this as he was putting it together and launching it with the rest of the team there. And now that it's up and running, I wanted him to come talk about kind of what the process is, what it is that they're looking for, what is the pot of money, what makes for a good project, things like that. So we're going to be recording this, so it'll be available after. But Jerry, this is really your show, your opportunity to get the info out there so we can make sure that you're getting good projects in the tobacco region.
Okay, sounds good. Well, thank you, Adam, for that introduction. So to everybody out in the audience, thank you for joining us today. Sorry about last week, but we had an opportunity, at least myself and the director, Campos, had an opportunity to go visit Dominion Center's signing of the bill for SMR.
Yeah.
So I think that's important because those are going to be part of this innovation fund. You know, for the energy fund that we're looking at, we're going to look at all technologies, and that will be discussed today. So thank you and welcome for today's presentation. So with that, they've asked me to get into the middle of the crux of the presentation today. But before I do, I have a little bit of background, if that's all right with everybody. So I've actually been in the energy business since I was 19. I shared this earlier with Brady and company. And so I'm very familiar with, you know, working with infrastructure. Primarily, I was part of the whole energy restructuring in California. Don't cringe out there. That's usually something you don't want to, you know, you don't want to comment on. But obviously that whole part of the industry I was actually part of, everything from the advocacy to the education, stakeholder engagement. And so with that, you learn firsthand everything from distribution, stakeholder engagement, transmission, infrastructure, substation. You learn exactly what's involved in the entire network. And with that, know that if you submit a project that I don't believe is scalable, I probably won't consider that. So that I just want to make sure to make that point as part of today's presentation.
Oh, I should say, all right, so Jerry is going to give a presentation. If you have questions along the way, please enter them in the chat and then we'll get back to them. You already
I put that.
Yep. Okay, so we're all set for everybody's question, and don't mind you know, don't mind the engagement. Feel free to ask any question you may have. So with that, we're going to go into the purpose of not only the background of the Tobacco Commission, but the purpose of the goals and the funding component. So the Tobacco Commission was established in 1999 by the Virginia General Assembly. It was actually part of a 46-state master services agreement as part of the settlement for the costs associated with basically tobacco smoking. Southwest Virginia. That's going to be really our major focus as part of the RFP that we've just rolled out as part of the funding. The funding mechanisms we have listed is available for projects in Southern Southwest region, which encompasses, and I'll get into this in more detail, The cities and the counties, which I'll highlight, is part of the map, I think, which is the next slide. But up to $6 million per region, both the southern and the southwest, for a total of $12 million. The one thing I do want to add to that, I will also look at opportunities for what I call stackable funding or bridge funding opportunities that maybe you can work with one of our other organizations here in Virginia, which is the Virginia Innovation Partnership Corp.
Yeah, you
right?
got it. You got it.
And so the other component may be the Virginia Department of Energy, which has available funding, but also the Tobacco Commission also has a loan program. So we will elaborate on maybe some opportunities that if your project has a great deal of potential for the technology, we will look at how best to partner, not only in those areas, but actually I will look at contacting friends of mine with the Department of Energy that may actually serve as a resource as well. So depending on what your technology or the opportunity may present itself with. So with that, next slide is eligible applicants. This is where your project idea or funding is going to have to be submitted by either a town, a city, a county within our tobacco region, local, regional, industrial, economic development authorities, regional authorities, and other government entities, units as they call it there, but entities. The other portion that you can actually work with is a nonprofit, incorporated and designated as a tax exempt by the IRS. Those are really the only two eligible components in which to get funding. It cannot be seen as a private entity submitting as part of these funds. You're going to have to literally educate one of those two entities to submit and convince the project is viable, whatever you're considering.
Is that only C3 or could it be C4, C6? Is there a limit on or is there a designation on that nonprofit entity?
Good question, Brady. I haven't looked into that specifically. Normally most of them are C3s, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
C4 has a different component. I think one of them has a political component.
Probably.
C6s have
Okay.
are like lobbying
C4 or
organizations.
C6.
Yeah.
It's probably only C3.
Yeah, so I would say if I had to venture to guess, it's probably C3.
Yep.
But I'll to circle back that as a question, and I'll confirm that for later on. So on the next slide, here is the areas that we cover both in the light teal, dark medium teal, and the sort of the orange color on the left-hand side. The one on the left-hand side is our southwest region, which encompasses 14 counties and 3 cities. That's that area right there. To the right of that represents our southern, or as often called is our southeast area, south side actually is what it's called. And that encompasses 20 counties and 3 cities within that footprint. Your project has to fall in with those boundaries that we will consider as part of the grant funding opportunity. General ineligible uses. These are just a list. There's actually a few more that often show up that I've encountered, but outside the defined tobacco region will not qualify. To supplement other state or federal funds, again, we will look at stackable opportunities. So it just depends on how the stackable outline, because I've learned from the Department of Energy, some are stackable, others are not. Okay, so for regularly recurring local responsibilities, comprehensive plans such as K through 12 school funding is usually not. So if you've got something that's going to target, the high school or middle school as part of your development, that we don't usually fund those types of programs. To finance endowments, we won't consider that. Debt retirement, we will not consider that. Ongoing operating support beyond an approved startup period, we won't consider that. Project administration or indirect project costs will not be considered. Activities initiated prior to grant, to grant approval. Acquisition or improvement of privately owned property, equipment, unless public, purposes are met and explicitly approved by commission. We like to avoid projects that only indirectly affect economic revitalization, community centers, childcare centers, recreational, local arts, and the rest is outlined for you in that general ineligible uses.
Could I ask you a question on that?
Yes.
So for the acquisition or improvement of privately owned property equipment, so does it end up being that application entity, whether it's that government or whether it's that nonprofit, that municipality or economic development, are they the ones that end up owning the project or owning the equipment that that you fund?
So for example, what I haven't seen yet, but we do have projects out there where the city, municipal, or the county will actually own the property itself.
Mm.
Okay, and then they'll try to figure out what the best use of that property is. And some are considering, as we've started to see, you got farmers that are looking at solar.
Yep.
Okay, that's an obvious one that actually looks at that. You've got cities that are looking at, okay, what's the best use for that property? Because I'm being asked those questions now.
Mm.
Would we look at a battery storage on one of those? And the answer is yes.
Mhm.
Okay, but we don't get into the property component, we get into the battery storage side.
Mm.
Got it.
Gotcha.
Okay,
And so then so like that municipality would then just have an O&M contract with someone to run it while they would own that asset that you
Right.
might fund.
and again, I think it's important, which I just, I just did a briefing with one of the other planning districts, actually. It was that, when you're looking at these projects, what I share with the planning districts, you have the ability as part of your approval to set whatever conditions you have, the conditional use permits are part of
Mhm.
this.
Oh, okay.
So I reminded them, just because your regs have what is approval, doesn't mean you can't ask for additional, things as part of the ask. So I just, it was a reminder because, the same goes for the grants. We may grant a project, but I've made sure to try to also educate those as part of the decision-making. You have the ability to ask for additional, whether it's information, additional requirements as part of the approval process.
Right.
Okay. There is actually one more that falls in the ineligible. I made this clear only because I've experienced it firsthand. We are not in the R&D phase. We're not a VC, organization. We're not in the venture capitalist component. So I will get into that a little bit later, but I want to make sure that got addressed.
Great.
So matching funds. This is part of the funding mechanisms, which is the next slide here. At least dollar for dollar on the match requirement. These are part of our requirements. There's no way around it. I've been asked if there's anything that we can do to get around it. No, that's just the way it is. That's part of the requirements set forth. No more than 25% of the match can be in-kind sources, personnel and operating costs already included in annual budgets, counts toward the 25% in-kind limit. Applicants have up to 12 months to secure matching funds if not secured at the time of the award. So I actually dealt with one this morning that I'll get into as an example of projects that I'm looking for, but I can't get past the 1-on-1 match. You're going to have to go out there and get the funding and look for it. Exemptions, loan requests do not require a match.
So on the match, that could be a lot of times you can't use state money to match state money, but if you had like a federal DOE grant or an SBIR, well, I guess it's not R&D stage, but if you had other DOE like federal money, that could match up with your tobacco commission money, or does it have to be private money?
That's a good question, Brady, because I just experienced that on this first round. What I did is I had gone to, without naming the entity, they had actually a big piece of manufacturing equipment dating back to the 1970s.
Okay.
Okay, and at the time they invited me to tour their facility. They said, we have something here that we know qualifies, we just don't know what it is. So I went out and visited the facility, and after a good chunk of the tour, I realized, had they looked at all their energy billing, their energy efficiency components, all that, you realize they're going, Jerry, we're also looking to replace this equipment, so it'll help with improving our lead times to get equipment out the door sooner. So I said, if you get rid of that equipment, how many jobs will it add? And so he goes, well, we think about 30 is what we've estimated. I said, that's your opportunity because that technology uses a lot of energy, correct? And he goes, yeah, I need those calculations. So, okay, how much are you spending in terms of how much oil and, hydraulic fluid, all that stuff are you using? Because I'm using about this much per month. I got this much maintenance. I said, okay, that's your carbon footprint.
Yeah.
Okay, that's what I highlighted. So after that, they said, well, we think the equipment's going to cost X amount of millions. I said, look, I'm willing to give you a portion of that, consider a portion of that, and actually match that other half that would get to the 1-to-1. With DOE potentially funding, but I'm not willing to give you all of it because it was a pretty big ask. So as luck would have it for them, the DOE, they were just over by about 20 some odd employees, which I didn't know at the time of the tour. And then the other program that they were eligible for as part of the tax program for replacing old manufacturing equipment with newer up-to-date energy efficient equipment. They had already utilized for something about a couple of years earlier. So, but at least we pursued an opportunity, is what we did, and they realized the opportunity was real. Then what came back is, well, maybe will you guys consider a loan? So that's kind of where we're at on that application. So that's where we're looking into that particular opportunity.
That's great that you have so many different levers that you could pull, right? Like it's broad enough but narrow enough, but you also have these other tobacco commission programs that they could go into.
Correct, and not so much that because of my contacts and relationship with some of the my former colleagues at Department of Energy. You know, I have the ability to literally pick up the phone and say, "Hey, does this qualify?" And they'll say, "No, but I think there's some other call. Let me put you in touch with so and so." And usually, you know, I do a pretty good job of just knowing what may or may not qualify because I got my pulse in with Department of Energy from my time there at Office Energy Impact. Now, the funny thing is, I wasn't there a long time, but I was actually got to know the programs of the various departments pretty well. While I was there. Because it was pretty empty actually, so it made it easier to get in and out and get all the information to do. So that's another story, another day. So with that, on application details, submit the nature, the source, the timing of the match contributions. You're going to have to get into detail. We will ask you for the financial background. Matching funds must be committed, available as needed, and not encumbered. Provide a commitment letter or equivalent document for the matching funds provider. You know, one other one that we're looking at right now looks like it's going to come. That you know, some of the funds are going to come from a specific energy fund, or not energy fund, a particular financial fund that's been set up to try to look at their technology. So, based on what they're looking at, that we said we just need to know that the money's there, the resources are there, they can be released, and all the other good stuff as part of. I mean, we do a pretty good extensive job of all the financial checks and balances, and thank God that's not my part of the job. I just give that to somebody else to take a look at. So, next, eligible investments on the execution purpose. We try to aid implementation of recommended energy projects. I will actually go out there with you and can you go back one, Brady? Oh shoot, I have a different page. Oh, here it is. Never mind, my bad. I will actually go look, and so I just met with one of our commissioners out last Friday, where they have a particular town that's looking at different technologies being added to their system. So I will actually look at their energy projects and say, yeah, I think this qualifies. There's an opportunity. The particular commissioner said, we think there's some additional opportunity once we do more, you know, the education. So funding up to 50% of third-party services, awards up to 50,000 uses. You know, those are all the uses: the administrative, professional, grant writing, management, and you know, legal and engineering expenses, capacity building, road mapping, planning. The one thing I found that was particular help when I was working on at the time was the largest renewable project going online. I always tell everybody, look, I was the electrical cord for all that renewables coming. There's a couple things you learn is that particular entity, the developer, actually was working with the state of California for some of their funding mechanism, and they're working with the federal government on some of their bridge funding as part of that program. In order for them to be approved by us as part of an agreement that we had as part of the power purchase agreement, they had to show that they were hitting certain milestones at certain periods of time in order for us to get that funding released. So what you have here is when if you're looking at, and I brought this up with one particular county entity, they're looking at a waste to energy. They said, hey, Jared, we're looking at this. I said, by all means, and it's going to lead into the next particular slide, which is basically a planning grant. So as you get into these executions, your energy infrastructure is scalable. At the end of the day, we want to get into some of those grants and look at, hey, is this particular application that you're considering, is it going to aid and recommend other energy projects? Well, waste to energy would fall into that, right? It's going to lead into more viability of taking what's already out there and turning it into energy and hopefully reducing the amount of waste that's making the landfills. However they look at that. Grants and loans, again, one-to-one match required, higher match for larger grants, uses, reasonable cost necessary for project implementation, project financing, loan-to-loan reserves. You know, some of the energy projects that, you know, develop and expand energy infrastructure with long-term benefits is our purpose there. The funding, grants for engineering design of on-site engineering infrastructure is one of the funding components. Uses, serve mega sites, regional industrial sites, pilot projects. You know, the one that comes to mind here that we were looking at is Berry Hill, which is in the Danville area, which is a site location. You know, we're looking at specific ways to increase natural gas to that location because of just the requests that have come in. So we're trying to, that's being handled a different, not through this program, but it's being handled by another part of the area in terms of how do we look at a loan for that size of project, for that as an example. Okay.
Are there loan sizing for these three different kind of buckets here? Like
No.
the last one was what, $50,000 for that,
Right.
that kind of planning one?
Not on these, no.
Okay.
So I'm looking for, I mean, you've got co-ops that also exists within the, you know, the tobacco footprint. So you actually have Dominion that covers, you know, primarily, for the lack of discussion, I might take some flack for this, because I don't know exactly where it cuts off. So
It's kind of everywhere.
Yeah, the southern side,
Yeah.
it's the southern side, and mostly Southwest is covered by APCO. So in general, I gotta say that, because in between those two areas, you've got co-ops that exist, and you've got cities that have been carved out because of their own areas. Is that pretty accurate?
Yeah, and it's a real mix, right? The whole region is a real mix of APCO, Dominion, co-ops, municipals. Yeah, you got a lot of different stakeholders on your hands then.
Yeah, I've been trying to educate not only myself on just the area, which is, I'm still learning and I'll consistently be learning, but I've had good support from not only commissioners, but my colleagues as well. In educating me going, you know, here's basically the areas that we service as stakeholders. Here's some of the large users. Because at the end of the day, I think the biggest concern is for not only all the users, but making everything affordable. The all of the above energy mix has really been a mantra, not only the administration, you know, Governor Youngkin's area, but also if you look at the need, you got to keep the rates and all of the energy uses affordable.
Yeah. So is the expectation that all of these projects end up being grid tied, or is there opportunity for behind the meter or off grid solutions?
I'm looking at everything.
Okay.
So right now, one of them I looked at this morning could be potentially half and half, a mix. You could look at the user potentially taking some of that load of the energy that's generated to feed maybe their equipment, and then what's left over, put it back into the grid as part of either grid resiliency or grid reliability, depending on the circuit.
Yeah.
So I don't want to get too technical for the group, but yeah, you could look into that as a potential. And the other thing that I've come across is scalable energy deployments. For the purpose of fund scalable energy projects, I mean, again, I've seen projects that are really not scalable. They'll have it in the lab, but they really don't have 3 years worth of field data. They only have it in the lab.
Yeah.
And that makes it hard because once you get it into inclemented weather and conditions, depending on technology, they'll say, well, Jerry, it works out here, great. Now send it out there and do some field testing, because once you get into cold weather, snow, desert,
hurricanes,
you know, wind, gee, the results didn't quite come out. And the interesting thing about that is I experienced that firsthand. The one site I mentioned on renewable we brought in was sort of a concentrated solar. It was estimated to generate roughly 385 megawatts of energy. I don't think it's ever hit 100% of what it was tailored. In fact, I beg to say I'd be surprised if it ever even hit 70%. But they had scaled it from, the technology came from Israel. Now, on the other side of the street, we have photovoltaic, and that was about 185 megawatts of photovoltaic. And that one was actually, what do they call it? It actually followed the sun.
Tracking.
Yep. It had all the tracking, and that one was well done. And it was with two different developers, two different technologies. Again, you can follow it because, I always tell everybody, well, you know what that first technology did? I said, look, I was the electrical for it. That's all I did. And it was the only 2 state approved project for that company. So it worked out pretty well. So that's everything on the execution of grants. There is a couple more that's been identified on the manufacturing incentives. We're looking at, as if you're looking to expand an operation, commit to job creation and private capital investment, as indicated earlier. If you're looking to replace some old equipment, that's where that falls in. The use of the funds, application will benefit a private entity, must have a public purpose. We've identified that there. The question here is, this particular manufacturing was part of the supply chain, for an example. They were going to actually improve the turnaround time of their equipment that was actually going to benefit the utilities, the municipalities, anybody that had service to distributing electricity. So they were in that business, and so without naming the entity. So for me, that's anything critical supply chain right now. We all know the delays we've all experienced on the supply chain side. I'm looking to if you've got a manufacturing product, whether it's a relay, a switch, or anything having to do with substations, even on the gas side, I just had this conversation with one of the commissioners. They've got new technology to improve the hookups for natural gas pipelines. So, okay, I'll look at that. If there's a supply chain component, I'll entertain all of that stuff.
In that situation, the public purpose is essentially job creation.
Job creation, as well as not only but access to other entities that may not have access to. In this particular case, it was natural gas. So you had all these natural gas that said, if you give me a natural gas line, the way it was sold to me from the commissioner was these entities will then say, I will add additional facility to then take advantage of that natural gas.
Got it. Okay.
They just needed that firm load hookup to be able to get the amount. Yep.
So there's some opportunity there. And energy workforce initiatives. I mean, if you've got an idea on the energy workforce, we've had a couple of proposals, but nothing that really. There is one that was tabled looking at as part of EV charger, being able to take former military or people that are coming out of the military and training them to be basically fix or repair EV chargers. So that looked pretty promising. The commissioner just wanted more information. So that's kind of where we're at. So there's an example of potential opportunity if you got those types of things that exist. So on the requirement side, depending on the nature of the project, the Energy Ingenuity Fund proposals require one or more of the following documents, and it's all highlighted in the RFP link that it's been distributed. The service area, the project location map required for all, the master plan with targeted sectors, the fee estimate or proposal from the engineer, depending on what you're proposing, the cost, the cost of the construction, the estimate or the contractors that are involved, the phase 1 environmental assessment. If you're looking at a site, it's got to pass all the assessment, site analysis assessed by the EDP, cash flow analysis, what rate structure required for utility infrastructure. We're looking for all that kind of stuff as part of the requirements. On the outputs and deliverables, the applicant must identify the deliverables expected to result from the direct use of our grant and matching funds from the Tobacco Revitalization Commission. Deliverables are accomplished during the grant period and are directly related to the use of the grant funds. And here are some of the examples. Change in industrial site readiness to improve marketability. We've done that with one site as mentioned. Berry Hill, there's other sites that we're looking at. Feasibility study or implementation plan, workforce needs assessment report, number of jobs created, amount of capital investment, product or service deployment. We have all that laid out in the RFP. Some of the outcomes for energy ingenuity execution timeframe. We have, again, this all outlined in the RFP. Estimate outcomes within 5 years after grant end date. Here are some of the measures, choose relevant measures based on the project, and include an arrow to explain the figures provided. We do sort of a flow chart that we've outlined to show what the outputs can be. Everything from the number of jobs created. I am always going to look at and ask, how many jobs are you going to create? I'm always looking at the capital investment component, as well as, I mean, if you're looking for the tobacco to fund 100% of your project, that is probably not the best idea, because our code says 1-to-1 match. So it's going to be a challenge. And so that's sort of the other challenge. And the last one is increase the coverage of the capacity of energy needs in the industry.
Go ahead. Well, I was just going to ask on the job. I'm thinking of like battery storage that you were talking about earlier. You're going to have a period of construction jobs, but the actual jobs created to maintain that asset are relatively minimal, right? And so are you counting then secondary and tertiary jobs just based on the dollars that are then invested in that project, so to speak, right? There's knock-on effects of the mechanic or even the retailer who's selling to the construction workers, things like that. Like, where do you look at that job number coming from?
So for me, the city or the community entity that's submitting, in that particular case on battery storage, I'm of the mindset that when I see one of those, it's not going to come from a nonprofit carrying that. It's going to be usually a town or city or some entity that's going to actually say, I've got this property, I want this done for this reason, that so therefore I'm willing to carry it on behalf of the, you know, the town of whatever it may be, or the county of, you know, one of our counties within the footprint. So they will look at not only the jobs and the opportunities, but they're going to also look at the property tax dollars. They're going to look at okay, how many jobs will be created? Is, you know, there's still a monitoring component to that. I don't know what that's going to look like, but they're also going to look at grid resiliency depending on where the need is. So they're going to look at all that. And so for me, I just get to ask all the questions. I get to make sure that at least it passes, hey, you know, all of the requirements at the end of the day, because that entity that's submitting it is going to be able to say and make the case for why it's needed in their community for approval. And so, but I got to be able to defend it at the end of the day that says, okay, what they propose is viable. It does fit the requirement. There's a need out there. I've got one of the utilities or the co-op saying it's, you know, it's going to help grid resiliency, which is one of the mantras that line is as part of our grid resiliency, and it's going to add this many jobs. So if it matches and checks off all of those checkoff boxes for me, you know, I may ask the question of the municipality, just make sure whatever entity you're selecting as part of that is not a fly-by-night operation. Okay, I will be adamant about that, because the one thing I did see in the solar industry, and I don't see it as much in the beginning as I did when the first, as I call it, the first generation solar panels. There was a lot more fly-by-night operations, you know, for that first, I want to say 5 years.
Yeah.
You know.
That makes sense.
And so you're not necessarily looking for a huge quantity of jobs, but it is one component of that for some of these projects, because I got you.
So, but again, in that particular example that you just laid out, Ray, I'm looking at, okay, I've got the town of this, making that request. They're finding the best use of their particular property is this particular project. I can't deny them that opportunity but, you know, is that the best use of their property? It's not my decision. That's really theirs. I can just say it meets our requirements. It's a viable. It's no different. They're going for permit approval, right? It meets all the things. Now the commissioners can then ask, well, is that the best use of our funds going out there? I mean, they have that ability to say, you know, even though it meets all the requirements, they may say, yeah, we think there might be a better use for that. If our funds go somewhere else.
Maybe you cover this, but could you just talk about, you've referenced it a couple of times, the commissioners and what that structure is, like who are the commissioners? What's that decision tree go up from you accepting applications, and then who is the commission? What is the commission?
Commission is made up. Ooh, good question. This is where I need my cliff notes actually, but there's 28 commissioners. I can only share with you the way I just set this up, and this literally got done with one exception of one commissioner. There's something I saw after the first commission meeting that became an opportunity. Is I want the commissioners to see, and we've set up an energy committee as part of this, just so you know. So I want the Energy Committee, which represents not only commissioners that are public, some of the other commissioners are delegates, they're representatives, and they're senators. And so I've met with literally every commissioner, which represents 2 senators, several delegates, and a couple public members. And I met with each one of them. One of the things I shared with them is, I want you to see what I see. I want you to know why I'm considering certain things, because at the end of the day, I don't have the knowledge they do of the communities they represent.
Right.
Okay, so all I get is a piece of paper that says this is what they're proposing, this is an organization, and all I can say is, okay, this may be a good idea. But so what I've done is I've asked the commissioners that they would consider doing something that I'm I don't know, I don't think it's been done, and that is, after we submit the first pre-app, I want you to see all the list of applicants that come in, so we can discuss them, go through them, and say, hey, are these organizations? Is this something that you've heard about, seen, or don't know? It becomes more of a communication opportunity for discussion.
Yeah.
And so all of them love the idea. They embraced it. I brought it up literally at the last commission meeting with the 2 senators. And I said, the other thing I asked the senators at the time, and I've asked some of the other commissioners as well that are delegates, is, hey, can you help me expand the stakeholder engagement component of this? Which means that you've got a newsletter that goes out to your constituents. Hey, somebody you may be sending out, maybe, a top executive with some of these companies, can you include this RFP in the future? So as I mentioned earlier, Brady, I don't have all the stakeholder lists developed yet. I've been working on it.
Yeah.
Adam and I shared this, what I started with, where I'm at.
Yeah.
I built it up quite a bit,
Yeah.
but I mean, I got a pretty expansive network, but I don't have the entire network, and I'll never have the entire network. But I need everybody's help as part of this. And so the commissioners that are on the Energy Committee, that's the only ones I really focus in, because they're the ones I essentially have to report to. In addition to the director, and which is also serves as a deputy, Secretary of Commerce, which I also report to Secretary of Commerce, which is Secretary America. So I got these dotted lines and solid lines, and at the end of the day, I just say I work for you guys. It makes my job a lot easier. But at least they know what I'm thinking and why I'm thinking what I'm thinking. So it's more transparent, if I may say it that way. And it allows me the opportunity to say, all right, of this batch, are there some that more about that says, ooh, that's not a good enough organization, or that's a good organization. I didn't know there was so many. Let me help them get some resources. So in addition to that, the other reverse part of your question is on the approval process. I'm also, as it goes into the application phase, whichever ones we move forward, I've asked for another meeting. So again, they can be part of that discussion piece. So if they've got other questions they want me to ask, or I haven't considered from their perspective, it allows me the ability to then get that information before the final commission meeting. And the other thing I learned is make sure that all these applicants show up to the commission meeting that are being considered. So they have the ability to answer any question that the commissioners may be. So again, as we do these new programs, there's always going to be some gaps, opportunities to improve. And so I'm looking forward to actually closing some of those gaps and refining the process. And Adam, you've been a big part of that. So thank you. My colleagues have been a big part of that. Vicky and is our grants director, Vicky Humphreys. And so she's been helping me. She handles all of the financing components. So she does all the stress tests to make sure it meets that code. Stephen Burson, which you brought up earlier, Brady, is our deputy director. So he's working primarily on the agribusiness, but he and I are working jointly on some of these things. These are the things where, I got to be able to reach out to my colleagues and say, hey, can you get me this gap? I don't have that knowledge in the area. I'm going to be working with my colleagues both in the South and Southwest on this, which is the Sarah Capps and Sarah Williams of the world, because they're actually engaged in their communities on a day-to-day, hour-by-hour basis. I'm not. I get out there when I can. I get out there, but the one thing I did say to the commissioners, look, I want to see you not just one time a year or the commission meetings. I want to get out here. I want you to plan a meeting. And they were like, okay, we'll have you. We'll make that happen. And they were all open to that. And so I've been totally embraced by the community. So thank you for that and everybody. And so that answers your question on how the process works.
Yeah, it sounds like a very community driven, process.
It is, because at the end of the day, there's a couple things I've learned. You can only expand, and I've shared this with both senators, actually, Senator Aird and Senator Hackworth. You can only expand so much within the tobacco footprint, especially on energy. You really have to expand beyond that area, because there's only so many companies that are going to look to expand, and energy is going to be a component of that. You know, the utilities and the co-ops already have their capital budgets and if they've done the jobs that coming from that industry, they already have a 3 to 5 year capital forecast. So they know where some of these capital dollars are going to go. I'm looking for those special projects that suddenly became a need because of either a new company moving in that needs to expand the circuit. As you know, those opportunities present. Could be a data center, it could be a battery storage project, it could be a number of things. But whatever that driving force is, you want to be able to say, okay, how are we going to get this up and going, and we can all participate to make that happen.
Great.
So with that, on the requirements, you got to get this pre-application, which is coming on the 18th. You got to get it submitted, and it's high level. You just go to our website. There's a pre-application link to fill out, submit it, and then if it passes, it gets through that stage of approval. Please be as complete as you can in terms of what you're looking at and what you're considering. A couple projects this morning that came about that I'll get into are, will I consider an R&D project? The answer is no, which I answered previously. But will I consider a demonstration project? So one of them has surfaced as an EV, which I'll consider that they're looking at. They're looking at it as installing EV charger as part of a demonstration that they want to do. Yeah, that came about.
Okay.
So that came about from somebody that's an avid, outdoors person, and actually had that request. And I said, yeah, I'd consider it. Now again, if I can do this part of stackable funding, I will. But it would technically be a demonstration, so I would probably go look and try to partner up with tourism to say, okay, is this something we can look at working together? Let's just do one site, see how that works. So that's one. Another one is a waste to energy. I'm looking for waste energy. I want hydrogen. I would love to be able to put hydrogen in this footprint. We already have one that's in the state of Virginia, that the technology they're using is more of a distributed model. And so I'd love to see that happen. The other one I'm working with, their funding is coming from California, believe it or not, because they see their market. They're seeing assembly here and distributed, and California seems to be one of their markets, but it's going to be done in it would actually be done in the south side, southern part of the district that they're looking at. So, so that's another one. And then, so with that, try to keep it. I mean, I had one entity just give me a complete data dump on a pre-app. It was all the technical stuff. I'm like, yeah, if I have to go through that, the commissioners are going to go through that. Okay, so I try to make that as simple. Just make it simple, and if I can dissect it pretty quickly on the full application. Once I go through it, if it's viable and it seems like the next step, I may say, oh, this is interesting. I need more information. I may still ask you to submit for the full application. It doesn't mean you'll get approved at that. But I'm going to be asking for more information with more questions. And that funding request is August 15th. And again, at the end of the day, the commission will evaluate all the applications submitted as part of the response. And again, there'll be a draft component, hopefully about a couple weeks prior to the actual commission meeting, that I'll go over with them. But and at the end of the day, they'll be able to see what I see and my thoughts on recommendations and so on and so forth.
Who's doing these applications? If you have a private entity that's that EV charging one, that battery storage one, I assume there's a private entity there. Are they the ones doing the pre-application with the municipality or with that nonprofit saying we support this? Or is it the municipality nonprofit that's actually doing the application with the partner of the private entity?
So the one for the EV is being driven solely by in this case, the municipality. Okay, they have a need for not only their community, but they think there's a need. And it was based on the conversation.
Got you.
Okay, and the other one in terms of the battery storage, it's gonna be again with the municipality.
So it's the municipalities are the ones really doing this application. And if you have a startup company or if you're a technology provider, you should actually be partnering with that economic development agency or that
Exactly.
municipality, giving them the information they need to complete the application on that.
And another one I'm looking at right now, that particular developer partnered with the economic development person, which is then gonna be driven by, in this case, a submittal by the county.
Yeah, okay. Great.
So again, those are examples. I mean, I had one example where I was talking directly with the developer and I said, okay, it's viable. What you're looking at, he was actually looking to manufacture batteries in our footprint. I said viable, but you're gonna have to go pick a city or an entity in the footprint. And I really thought that was gonna move forward, and somewhere it got tabled. So I don't know if they just decided not to move forward with it or not, but they had technology. They were ready to actually build and assemble, not manufacture. They were actually just put everything together as manufacturing for battery storage. So missed out. There was another technology, was manufacturing for a different way of handling solar panels. And I actually liked the technology enough because one, it was going to manufacture a technology which would have created the jobs, and it was going to be used to actually look at a different way of mounting solar panels in vacant areas. And it was actually probably a little bit more mobile. And I thought, this works. If you guys say do a site, get approval, but it never surfaced.
So in kind of those cases, then it's this is actually a tool in the economic development agency or authority's tool belt to actually provide as an incentive for some of that attraction economics. So
Correct.
it's not so much up to the private entity, but the economic developers could use this as a tool and guide that as an incentive way to bring some places to them or bring some companies. Awesome.
So, and again, I've been out there that I met with a few economic development people, and actually one of them said, well, Jerry, I was told by this entity this circuit can carry 10 megawatts. And I looked and yeah, I don't think so. So, and I say that because, I grew up in this industry. I know the industry, and I'm thinking, yeah, everybody doesn't realize that when you're looking at transmission lines or distribution lines, it's like roadways, right? The more lanes you have, the more you can handle the amount of flow of traffic, right? It's the same goes for transmission and distribution. So when you're looking at 10 megawatts, I'm thinking, yeah, maybe between the hours of 12 and 4 in the morning, you could, but I can get into the technical nature, but I'm gonna lose half the audience out there. So you have to balance that by, there's an education that has to be understood by saying, hey guys, work with me and I'll share with you how to work with the dominions of the world, how to work with the other utilities of the world, and how to ask better questions as well, to know what to ask for, because sometimes that's part of the challenge, is knowing what to ask for. And my goal is to actually help bridge that.
So scoring.
Yeah, scoring, we just go through a process. I go with my colleague. In this case, it's Vicky Humphreys, and that's just the breakdown that we look at in going through it. In some cases it's hard because the assessment and need eligibility, it still can be a little subjective at the end of the day. So you kind of you got to do your best to try to say, okay, but again, I'm going to really focus in. For me, it's going to be about the funding component, the one-to-one match, how strong that looks, and are you creating jobs and economic development opportunity? That's really kind of what it's going to be. So next one, this is sort of the staff breakdown. Again, as grant director, at the end of the day, all the pre-apps all go to Suzette. She forwards them right away to me. She is on top of it like nobody's business. For me, I recommend don't call that number because I'm never there. You guys have me out everywhere. Okay, you guys call that number, you probably won't get a call back. But it's there because that is the work number. Email is the best way. What I've given to a lot of my friends like Adam, they got my cell number. So if you email me, call me. If you email me, I will get back to you no more than a day.
Yeah.
I'm usually pretty good. Adam will tell you, I'm pretty responsive.
You're active.
Yeah, no, I'm active. And if you text me, I'm probably more active. And so the hard part is just kind of, educating the community. It's like, when I was educating the commissioners, like, no, if you email me, the worst case is if you email me on Friday, the worst case is you'll get an email back to me on Monday. If you email me Thursday afternoon, yeah, it's probably could be still Monday. But normally, commissioners are pretty good about responding quickly. So, again, if it's something for the community and you've got a quick question, just your subject matter really helps, because if I see it like, oh, okay, this is just another application, I'll get to that, but it's just going to be in line with everybody else's. And I'd rather, especially if you have a quick question, those are easy to sort through pretty quickly. But I am responsive. And then for Vicky, Vicky handles, as mentioned, the grant. She's the overall grants director, so she works and has the overall responsibility of making sure that it passes. And for me, where she helps me out, she does all the financing stress tests, and she helps me out with preparing the final memo of, okay, are we going to recommend or not recommend? And so she helps me craft that part of the report for the commission. So she's been a great resource for me. So thank you, Vicky, if you're looking. But she's been sort of the right arm of the agency. So she just says, okay, it's your program, you figure it out, and that's what everybody's told me. It's your program, you figure it out. So if I could get as good as Vicky on the finance side, I would figure it out. So I'm not there yet. I will get there, but I'm not there yet. So and I got no problem throwing myself under the bus. So and yeah, I think you figured that out. It's like, hey, Adam, I dropped the ball on this one. It's like, all right, you owned it. So
We got a few minutes left for questions. That was awesome, Jerry.
anytime.
You got some in the queue? I mean, I've got, like, I can jump into other questions I have.
I can stop sharing.
Got RFP link. I think this is a quick one. The catalyst, the smaller catalyst planning grant.
The planning grant?
Okay,
Yeah.
does that also require a match?
Yes, it does.
Okay.
So if you're thinking of if you're thinking of a particular location, a site, an environmental, usually because of my background in that area, I realize that's where an opportunity presents itself, because a lot of times what's overlooked is the environmental, reports that haven't been done, right? So we've allocated for that.
Got it. All right, looks like.
So looks
There
like,
is one.
yep. Go.
One question about confirming that the pre-application is due on July 18th, and then the complete request is August 18th.
August 15th,
August 15th.
I believe.
So
And-
Thursday and then next month.
Yeah, exactly. And there's a quick turnaround time. I had hoped to get it out earlier. Just I missed something and not seeing it. So like it was one of my colleagues that brought it to my attention. I went, ooh, okay, that should have gone out. I thought it got approved. So again, these little bumps are gonna happen, and I got no problem throwing myself under the bus.
Sweet.
I'm such an experienced level that, having been involved so long, you're like, yeah, okay, I dropped the ball.
And Kristen is asking, what's the grant period for what's the length of performance period for the catalyst for the planning grant?
I believe, okay, we can't let it sit for too long. So if you're looking at, you got this like 3 years from now, I would submit as it gets closer to when. But I tell everybody, 12 million is what I've been allocated. The minute that goes, I don't know what happens after that.
Right, so if they get it, they should be going into planning pretty quickly.
Yeah, you should already be in the planning process or pretty close of, you have an idea of location. I think I've been told 3 years. I'm going by memory. And of course, I'm gonna be told you should already know that answer. So I think it is 3 years, and I'll go with that, but I would just, we can't, once we allocate something you've been approved, we don't like the money sitting. We want to get the money out in the community as fast as possible. I gotta stress that.
Will there be another round, or is this the final one?
There will, no, this round, as I shared earlier with Brady, is, I'm hoping to refine the process, which means I think I'll have them more expanded by the time we get to the third round. Which means that I would expect that our goal is to get as much of this 12 million allocated by the end of the year. For our next commission meeting will be sometime in January. So In fact, I've got sort of a target date right after September. After our September commission meeting, I believe within the following week after the commission meeting, I'd already have the third round being rolled out.
Okay, so your process is, so we have a quick cutoff until this pre-application, then full application, but the commission's meeting in September.
Correct. It's I think the third week is September.
All right.
I'll confirm the date.
So this is a super fast process as far as, you know, the government style grant goes,
Right.
and then you'll be rolling out round 3.
Right. And if you're not prepared to answer questions and turn around to me within a day or two, I will probably just say you're carried over to the next one.
Yeah.
You got to know something about me. I don't have time to wait for people. You know that, Adam, working with me already. I know you all have circumstances, and only because what I saw happen in the first round, it was like, well, can we have more time? It's like, well, you should already have these answers ready to go on your financials. You should already have these answers to go on your proposals. I will ask some really tough questions because, you know, I got to make sure the project's viable.
Right. Yep. All right, so it's better to take your time, have it put together and have your answers ready than rush to get into this round.
That would be one, but if you're afraid that you might not make it to the third round, get it in, but no, I'm gonna ask a ton of questions and just, you know, you may have to work longer hours than you anticipated.
You have a few more coming in. Is there a target date for the third round of applications?
I do. I will tell you, it'll literally, my goal is this time, having learned from this first round and having learned from the second round, I will have the third round ready to go within a week of the commission meeting. So it'll be the end of September sometime, and which means that if you look at the time period, I have 3 or 4 weeks after that, that will be the pre-app period. And then 3 or 4 weeks after that will be the application period. And then January will be the commission meeting. I mean, I'm giving you time. I don't have actual dates because we don't go beyond our September commission meeting. So I'm just giving you sort of a target date.
So in many regards, you're looking for more or less shovel-ready projects that are ready, because you have to submit, your full application has the engineering documents, the cost estimates in it, and so that phase 1 environmental, right?
That would be ideal, Brady, but not necessarily. What I'm looking for is, I'll give you an example. I had one proposal application submitted where they were actually asking for almost literally all of the fund. So and the way I conveyed this to my fellow commissioners, or the commissioners I report to, let me say it that way. I said, they were saying like, they had this whole house built, it was gonna be a Mediterranean style villa, they had the columns laid out. But the minute I asked, okay, show me the plans, they had, oh, we're not there yet. So they gave me sort of a concept.
They had it up here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I need more than that.
Yep.
So at the end of the day, I'm not looking for shovel ready, but I am looking at, hey, if you're looking to have a project that's gonna be funded and it's a demonstration, do you have what I call the letters of agreement in place for the energy that you're trying to look? Do you have the easements already squared away for some of those opportunities? If it's you know, to do an interconnect. Again, you can do behind the meter. I haven't seen any of those. If you're looking for, you know, bio, I'm looking at bio right now, which we approved one organization to look at, you know, opportunities with feedstock. So we are looking for various technologies.
Great.
We had one quick more. How much of the funding was allocated at round 1?
Round 1 was just a planning grant, so that was 50,000. The other ones are, again, they were more information requested. Okay. So there's still enough left in those funds that we can say just go with it.
So there's still 11 million something
Yeah,
left in that.
There's still quite a bit left because again, I'm bridging the stakeholder engagement component gaps associated with that. So
We're at 12.
We're at 12. All right. Thanks everybody for joining us. Jerry, that was awesome.
Thank you.
We really appreciate it. So you've got 2 days. Hope if you're ready to go, get it in now. If you're not ready to go, get your ducks in a row and get ready for round 3, which we'll be sharing as soon as Jerry shares it with us.
Okay.
And they tell them it's time to go. Yeah, man, this is great.
I'm looking forward to it. I'm looking forward to doing this again next round 3.
Yeah.
All right.
Come on in.
And especially because then you can come back and tell us what kind of projects you're seeing that are really, really cool that you're really excited about.
I am.
Seeing get off the ground.
Love it.
It's fantastic to have this happening in Virginia finally. As a native, this makes me really, really happy.
All right.
So thank you for coming.
Thank you.
We appreciate it.
Thank
Thank
you,
you, everybody.
Have a
Take
good
care,
one.
everybody.